Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, is made possible by a grant from Bell Atlantic, a major provider of telecommunications, information services, and entertainment. We make the technology that makes life easier. Bell Atlantic, the heart of communication. And by annual financial support from viewers like you.
America, a land blessed by nature. From surf-pounded shores to blizzard-whipped mountain spines, to canyons and cascades, towering cliffs, rolling hills, and gentle vales. More than 3,600,000 square miles of bewildering variety, heart-stopping beauty, and youthful vigor. And all of this is overseen, guided, and governed from an old East Coast city that also combines variety, beauty, and vigor. It cherishes the tangibles of nationhood, reminders of past struggles and triumphs, of giant steps forward, of deep, unspoken pride. It is Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Dawn first touches the Washington Monument, then brings light to the grid of streets and the diagonal avenues of the nation's capital. As the sun rises, the city's monumental heart takes on full meaning. Its rivers glint with gold, its marble temples gleam, dark patches become swales and pockets of greenery. And the most recognized symbol for all America, its ideals, turbulent history, and boundless hopes, also comes to life: the U.S. Capitol. The broad wings, tall colonnades, and looming dome. Every line is familiar to every one of us, for this is it. This is Washington, the seat of our nation's government. The building itself showcases the drama of American history through the paintings of John Trumbull and by the work of Italian immigrant artist Constantino Bermudi, who decorated hallways and arches and risked his life painting the soaring murals of the Capitol Rotunda. Plenty of human drama still rocks the grand old building, with senators and congressmen hammering out legislation, wheeling, dealing, and hewing as close to the party line as they can. And their voices blend with echoes from here in the old Senate chamber, where impassioned oratory of Daniel Webster and Henry Clay rang out long, long ago. Here in the main rotunda of the National Archives, sealed in helium under protective glass and armed sentry at their side, is where the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights are displayed. Seeing the actual manuscripts with occasional ink spots is a breath catcher for Americans, along with the indelible signature of John Hancock, written large enough, as he was supposed to have said, for King George to read it without his spectacles. The nation's forefathers designed American democracy as a mighty triangle of power: the executive, the legislative, and this, the judicial branch. At the end of a grand and great hall, another sanctum, inside the Supreme Court building, holds the 9 chairs where gowned justices give their judgments on matters that affect the governing of our nation. Argument and oratory, wisdom and sometimes folly hold their court here. From Marbury versus Madison to Roe versus Wade, this is the arena in which America's most tangled questions concerning life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are ruled upon. Enlighten the people, said Thomas Jefferson, and tyranny and oppression of the body and mind will vanish. The Library of Congress. This original building, the Jefferson Building, possesses the most glorious interior in all of Washington. Its ceilings and walls are adorned with the names and thoughts of the greatest writers through history. This is all America's library, welcoming not just Senate aides digging for research, but every one of us. There are some 100 million or so items of learning here, from which, magically, the bit of knowledge you seek will appear before you at one of the tables circling the main reading room. It was always a White House. But when first planned, some called it the Presidential Palace. After the British burned it in the War of 1812, it was rebuilt, refurbished, and became simply the White House. But the interior celebrates every hue of the palette. The Blue Room's color was President Van Buren's idea. Designed as one of the 5 White House reception rooms, it's probably the favorite of them all. The Green Room started as a small dining room for James Monroe, the first president to reoccupy the home after its rebuilding. The Red Room has been carefully maintained as a simple but spectacular state parlor. And the state dining room is where kings and queens have rubbed elbows and discreetly competed. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. Easily the most famous address in all America. Serene and understated, this gentle temple houses the memorial to the most beleaguered, most reviled, most beloved American president, Abraham Lincoln. Rescuer of a shattered nation, here he sits in marble with his gaze upon us all, upon his capital city and his America. We're coming, Father Abraham, 600,000 strong, sang the Northern soldiers in the Civil War. And today people come here by the millions, sometimes to protest, sometimes to preach, always to stand beside Father Abraham and touch base with their nationality. The perfect pearl in the Capitol's tiara, the Jefferson Memorial. It's designed after one of his favorite buildings, the Pantheon. Architect, writer, inventor, president. Here, Thomas Jefferson stands tall amid his own writings, most notably from the Declaration of Independence. At 555 feet, this was once the world's tallest tower. Then a French engineer named Eiffel built one in Paris that surpassed it by 400 feet. Still, the monument is a breathtaking sight. Started in 1848, its construction was stopped midway by the Civil War. A visible line where the quarry stone changes color shows where the task was taken up again in the 1870s. Visible from miles, the Washington Monument stands as an axis for the city's long vistas, a constant reminder of the very beginnings of this nation. And the theme of our founding and freedom is celebrated over and over in every mural, statue, and inscription that adorns this city. The nucleus of democracy, Washington, D.C. Here rests Ben Burgess, a private of the 5th Division in World War I. And here in Arlington National Cemetery lie some 200,000 like him who, over the years, fought in their country's wars. The neat stones in endless phalanxes sweep through the peaceful glades of what was once the estate of Robert E. Lee. Some of his rebel soldiers lie here beside their old enemies, and a phrase from their touching epitaph explains quite perfectly why all these Americans have fought for their country, in simple obedience to duty as they understood it. Fort Washington. George Washington chose this site for a fortification to guard the Potomac. It was destroyed in the War of 1812 and rebuilt to protect the capital during the Civil War. Today, it's a public park, the perfect setting for a picnic by the river. Manassas, Virginia was a picnic ground in the summer of 1861 when Washingtonians in sporting fashion drove over these peaceful fields in their carriages to see the raw Union Army crush the Southern Rebellion. But here, at a creek called Bull Run, the Union troops fell in a horrifying and bloody defeat. No one could fathom the chaos and carnage that loomed ahead in what was to become the Civil War. Young men were torn and shattered in Vietnam, too. Over 50,000 didn't get home. Here are their names, etched in marble, wedged into the earth and deep into the hearts of so many who come here. On a knoll across the Potomac, bronze Marines of World War II raised their flag in victory on the volcanic peak of Suribachi, high point of an island named Iwo Jima. Tall, straight, faceless, emotionless, immaculate in army blue. The picked troops from the Old Guard do their sentry duty at Arlington's Tomb of the Unknowns. Here lie 4 servicemen, known but to God, who were killed in each of the wars dating back to 1917. Chosen at random, these unknown warriors accept their nation's honor on behalf of all the other thousands, never identified. All is silent, except for the crack of heels coming together and the whispered cadence of polished boots. Lest we forget, lest we forget. The Old Guard is also the 3rd Infantry, an active, regular Army unit poised to plunge into battle if word should come from the Pentagon, heart of the American military establishment. And nearby, at Andrews Air Force Base, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, its fighters are a first-line strike force, armed, fueled, ready to take off. Some 30 miles from Andrews at the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, 4,800 carefully selected young men and women trained to become commanders and leaders who will guide America's military might in the years ahead. The gravesite of John F. Kennedy, World War II hero, president. His eternal flame shimmers from the stone terrace of his grave directly across the Potomac from the Washington Monument. People who see the flame are reminded not just of JFK and the great hope he brought to his short presidency, but of all the other American forefathers who asked nothing of their country, but gave it all they had. The city of Washington knew so many of them, but so too does every community in the United States. Simple American families who do their best with a sense of sacrifice and tolerance, integrity and honor. For all of them, too, the flame glows. Washington, D.C. is endowed with some of the greatest collections and treasures in all America, many of which are under the domain of the Smithsonian Institution. The castle, as Washingtonians call it, is the Smithsonian's administrative heart. Its first secretary, Joseph Henry, lived here with his family in the 1860s, and the castle has since seen vast changes in the Washington landscape. Lincoln used to climb the highest tower where Dr. Henry experimented with meteorology, and the two would watch the Union Army troops experimenting with semaphores on the green. The only building protruding out into the grassy ribbon of the Washington Mall, the castle stands tallest amid the other Smithsonian museums. Each museum is an extraordinary experience and adventure, perhaps none so wild as the Museum of Natural History. Ever wondered what a Conestoga wagon looked like starting out for the Oregon Trail? In the Museum of American History, you can jump through a century of time with the turn of a head. Across the mall, the Arts and Industries building houses a most striking antique locomotive, a Baldwin of the 1870s used in the western mining country. The building itself is a celebration of lavish Victorian design, originally built in 1876 to house the country's first centennial exhibition. It opened just in time for President Garfield's inaugural ball in 1881. Each day, there is a constant parade of airliners gliding into Washington National Airport, and it seems that at least half of every passenger list heads straight for one of the Smithsonian's most popular destinations, the Air and Space Museum. Here is the original Wright Flyer, hanging at just about the altitude it reached in 1903. Nearby, ancestors of today's airliners seem to still fly. A brief 66 years from the first tottering step into the air, man made his giant leap for mankind when Armstrong and Aldrin stood on the moon. Looking at the craft that orbited, even hooked up in space, it seems a millennium of learning must have been crammed into this 20th century. The 20th century also is the milieu of the Smithsonian's Hirshhorn Gallery and Sculpture Garden. These sculptures broke from age-old traditions just as surely and just at the same time as mankind finally broke from the bounds of Earth. Auguste Rodin shattered the ceiling of acceptable art at the turn of the 20th century, and his contemporaries in sculpture and painting exuberantly defied the old rules, sending art leaping from the ground along with planes and spacecraft. Two Smithsonian galleries, the Museum of American Art and the National Portrait Gallery, are housed in Washington's old patent office in the heart of town. The Portrait Gallery is famous for its Hall of Presidents, from Washington to Reagan. 40 faces from over 200 years. George Bush will be added soon, and Clinton, too, in time. In 1941, Washington, D.C. added yet another jewel to its great collections and treasures, the National Gallery of Art. Millions of visitors move past these walls each year to view collections of famous European art, originally donated by millionaire and statesman Andrew Mellon. Mellon acquired much of this work when the Russian Revolution brought about the sale of the famed Hermitage Museum of Leningrad. It since has been augmented by the Kress, Widener, Rosenwald, and other collections, from early Italian religious art to French Impressionists. To Dutch and Flemish masters. Just another fountain away, thoroughly modern this time, is the National Gallery's East Wing. What a difference a few years make. No serenely classic structure this, but the sharp-angled, severe, fascinating work of architect I.M. Pei, a building that is itself a sculpture. Inside, a huge mobile by Alexander Calder swings above the statuary of Britain's Henry Moore and other modernists. For this East Wing was conceived to take over where the old gallery left off. It and its artistic works celebrate the 20th century with a nod to the 21st. Revealing, a little frightening, always exciting. The name Dumbarton Oaks means to most people a World War II meeting which resulted in the founding of the United Nations. It's hard to believe that this romantic garden with lush greenery and dainty blossoms could have been the site of anything so worldly. But President Franklin D. Roosevelt selected this 27-acre estate for the epochal meeting of statesmen simply because it is such a serene sight, escaping public notice. These truly are Washington, D.C.'s secret gardens. The National Building Museum offers a permanent exhibit of Washington's architecture, but the choicest display is the building itself. Designed in a palazzo style by Civil War General Montgomery Meigs, its massive columns soar 76 feet to the ceiling, the tallest in the world. At one time, this was the largest indoor working space in the entire capital. "40 majestic rooms, 24 manicured acres, all magically in the midst of Washington, D.C. This is Hillwood, a mansion built in the roaring 20s by the serial heiress Marjorie Merriweather Post, and now said to be the greatest trove of Russian imperial art outside Russia itself. Every turn reveals paintings of czarists and czarinas. Fabergé eggs rest beside priceless icons, and diamonds, rubies, and emeralds add a brilliance beyond belief. Washington National Cathedral, surely one of the most beautiful in the world, rivaling Chartres in France. Nearly a century passed between the laying of its first cornerstone by President Theodore Roosevelt to the placing of the final embellishment in 1990. In the meantime, while work on the transepts continued, while stone carvers shaped finials and sculptured ornate entrances, and glaziers assembled stained glass windows, services were held wherever a roof permitted. Its theological name is Cathedral Church of St. Peter and St. Paul, the seat of the local Episcopal diocese. But this is a national cathedral in every sense, welcoming all, memorializing the best of the nation. Infected still with such hopes, Americans rightly cherish the great monuments and mementos, symbols and treasures that define the country past and present. Ever in view, here they are kept for all to see, all to remember, in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Every April, a pink-tinged mist sweeps across the heart of Washington, D.C., transporting its people to a beautiful, hazy cloud, far from offices, traffic jams, even politics. The cherry blossoms are out, and the city comes to life on this most passionate of cues. Adams Morgan. The two names are those of two schools which were integrated in the 1950s. The integration of the neighborhood followed, and it flourishes today as the most colorful stretch of ethnic restaurants and storefronts in the entire city. The colors here are fashioned by the hand of nature. Every spring, Rock Creek Park takes on its foliage and becomes a vast wilderness in the midst of the city. Teddy Roosevelt used to swim here. In Washington's youth, markets were the only places to shop for fresh food. The city had many of them. The National Archives is built on the site of one. Now, only Eastern Market survives as one of the few open-air establishments for fresh produce. Not far from the Capitol itself, residents and congressmen alike have been convening here each weekend since 1802. And along the shore of the Potomac, the eastern seaboard's best catch of the day, some still trying to get away, can be found at Washington's Fish Market. Washington is a university town many times over. Georgetown is America's oldest Roman Catholic university, founded by John Carroll of Maryland's most eminent Catholic family. It's famous for its law and medical schools, its foreign service program, and its slender spires stabbing the sky above the Potomac. Howard was founded right after the Civil War by a one-armed Union general, Oliver O. Howard. Though it welcomes all comers, Howard remains predominantly Afro-American. The painted dome on the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception marks Catholic University, famed for its drama school. Not far away is Gallaudet, the world's only university devoted to hearing-impaired students. old post office with Ben Franklin's statue in front of it. Once destined for demolition, Congress realized it would cost more to raise the building than to restore it. Judging by its popularity today, perhaps that was one of their wiser acts historically. As the last rays of sunlight give way to invading darkness, a newfound beauty emerges around the Capitol. Its temples, monuments, and landmarks begin to sparkle like jewels set against the black velvet of night. The land surrounding Washington, D.C. is gentle, lazy, and lush. Back in 1632, early explorer Henry Fleet predicted the rise of a great city here along the Potomac. Writing in his log, "This place, without question, is the most pleasant and healthful in the country, and the most convenient for habitation." Only Great Falls breaks the serenity of the landscape where water moves with such ferocity, even the shores are said to tremble. 30 miles from Washington, near the Chesapeake Bay, stands Annapolis, Maryland, where scores of 18th century houses are still in use. The domed state capitol once served as the national capital in the pre-Washington city days. On his way home to Mount Vernon on the Potomac, ex-General George Washington passed through Alexandria, Virginia. It was his town, its taverns, apothecary shops, and waterfront warehouses ever at his disposal while he was the squire of his acres. Alexandria has so carefully preserved its old town that George Washington still would be able to find his way around were he to revisit his old haunts today. No one could live in this city without absorbing with every breath its past story, a grand and dramatic saga, and its always contentious hopes for a future. Ideals still survive in the nation's capital. They get twisted, battered, and bent, but the whole presence of this city, the loom of its monumental buildings and memorials to truly great dreamers, doers, and leaders, lies over every shoulder in Washington, D.C., reminding every soul that the United States is supposed to be great and good. And it will be. It will be.
PBS.